Derek Lawson had always believed that passion was the foundation of his marriage. For nearly 2 decades, his nights with Lauren had been electric, sheets tangled, bodies slick, breaths ragged as they surrendered to the primal hunger between them. She had been insatiable once, the kind of woman who would drag him into the shower before work, who would press her lips to his ear at dinner and whisper things that made it impossible to wait until they got home. But now, something was off. Lauren still let him touch her, still moaned beneath him, but the fire felt rehearsed. Her hands gripped him the way they always had, but there was hesitation in her movements and absence in her eyes. One night, he woke up to find her bathed in the dim glow of her phone screen, breath shaky, fingers disappearing beneath the sheets. She thought he was asleep. Derek watched, his stomach twisting as realization hit him like a punch to the gut. She wasn't thinking about him. The woman who once begged for his touch was now getting off to something or someone else. And for the first time, Derek felt the sting of betrayal. Derek had always prided himself on being an observant man. He could read a room, anticipate a client's hesitation, and know exactly how to turn the tide in his favor. But when it came to Lauren, his own wife, his own bed, he had been blind. It started subtly, like a whisper of a storm on the horizon. Her kisses grew shorter, her body stiffened beneath his hands, her moans lost their conviction. At first, he convinced himself it was stress, exhaustion. But soon, her excuses became a script, repeated too often to be real. "I'm just tired, babe. Work has been crazy this week. Let's try tomorrow night, okay?" Tomorrow never came. The distance between them wasn't just physical. It was something darker, something deliberate. And yet, she still let him have her, still let him slip inside, still let him claim her body like nothing had changed. But Derek could feel it. Her skin warmed under his touch, but her mind was elsewhere. And then, the moment he couldn't ignore, the night she gasped his name while her nails dug into his back, but her eyes were squeezed shut too tight, her movements too forced. She wasn't making love to him. She was pretending he was someone else. And as he lay beside her afterward, staring at the ceiling while she rolled away, Derek realized something that made his chest ache. His wife wasn't just slipping away. She had already left. She just hadn't told him yet. Derek didn't need her to say it. He already knew. The night Lauren walked through the door, her hair tousled, lips slightly swollen, a faint bruise at the base of her throat. He felt the final crack in his reality. She wasn't careless. She had been too careful for months, too controlled. But this time, she had slipped, and Derek saw everything. He was already waiting in the dim light of the living room, a whiskey glass in his hand, the ice melting as he stared at her. "Where the hell have you been?" His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that carried a threat. Lauren hesitated, her hand gripping the strap of her purse. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Out. A single word. Dismissive, like he was some fool who didn't deserve an answer. Derek leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His stomach was tight, his fists curled into the leather of the couch. "Out where, Lauren?" Silence. Then, the moment that confirmed everything, she sighed, rubbing her temples, avoiding him, as if he were the burden. "I don't want to talk about this." Derek exhaled slowly. It wasn't exhaustion in her voice. It was guilt. And in that moment, he knew his wife had been in another man's arms. Derek didn't explode. He didn't shout. Rage was too easy. Instead, he watched her, measured, calculating, filing away every movement, the nervous shift of her weight, the way her breath hitched, the way she refused to look at him. "You don't want to talk about this?" His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Lauren exhaled sharply, as if she was the one inconvenienced. "I'm tired, Derek. Can we just not do this tonight?" For years, he had given her the benefit of the doubt, loved her blindly. But now, that love felt like a noose tightening around his throat. He rose from the couch, slow and deliberate. She flinched, just slightly, just enough for him to see the truth. She knew she was caught. He stepped closer, his pulse steady, his voice lower now. "Tell me where you were." "Nothing." "Tell me who he is." Still nothing. Then she did something that made his stomach churn. She tried to move past him, like she could just walk away from the wreckage she created. He caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to make her stop. Lauren. Finally, she looked up, her lips parted, her expression unreadable. It's not what you think. A bitter laugh rumbled in his chest. That's the problem, he murmured, stepping back. I already know exactly what is. Derek didn't confront her again. Not yet. Instead, he let her believe she had one. The next morning, Lauren woke to find him in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had changed, his lips brushing her forehead in a soft, familiar gesture. She relaxed into it, unaware that his touch had already turned to ice. That night, when she crawled into bed, he took her, slowly at first, then harder, until her body arched, until her breath came in short, desperate gasps. She clung to him, her nails scraping down his back, her moans filling the room. And Derek watched her, not with love, not with devotion, but with the cold, sharp clarity of a man who finally saw his wife for what she was. She thought this moment meant something, thought it was proof that everything was okay. But when it was over, Derek didn't hold her. He didn't kiss her. He simply rolled away, staring at the ceiling. And as she drifted off to sleep beside him, sated and oblivious, he reached for his phone. The investigator's number was already pulled up. Tomorrow, he would get the truth in ink, and Lauren would never see it coming. Derek had always believed that if you wanted the truth, you had to be willing to dig for it yourself. And now, as he sat in his car outside the investigator's office, his heart a steady drumbeat in his chest, he was ready. The file sat heavy in his hands, thicker than he expected, filled with evidence he had hoped wouldn't exist. He flipped it open, and there it was, photo after photo of his wife entangled with another man. Noah Carter, young, fit, arrogant, a man who didn't know what it meant to build something real, only how to destroy it. Derek inhaled slowly, flipping through images of stolen touches, desperate embraces. Her lips parted as she melted under another man's hands. The worst part? She still let him touch her, still let him bury himself inside her at night, while she spent her days tangled up in Noah's sheets. She was playing him, and she thought he'd never find out. Derek snapped the file shut, his jaw tight, his next move already forming. He wouldn't confront her. Not yet. First, he would take everything. And when she finally realized what was happening, it would already be too late. Derek played his role perfectly. Calm, collected, deceptively devoted. Lauren had no idea that while she kissed him goodnight, he was stripping her of everything. While she lay in bed, sighing contentedly after letting him take her one last time, Derek was on his laptop, locking accounts, rerouting funds, securing assets. She thought she had fooled him, but she was the one walking into a trap. The divorce papers were drafted before sunrise, filed before she even knew what was happening. By the time she woke up, stretched, and smiled at him over coffee, her entire world had already begun to crumble. It wasn't until a few days later that she realized something was wrong. Her card declined. Once, twice, a third time. Derek watched from across the room, expression unreadable as she fumbled with her phone, checking her accounts, panic creeping into her face. Derek, something's wrong with my cards. He sipped his drink, slow, methodical. No, Lauren, something's wrong with your life. Confusion flashed across her face. Then fear. What did you do? Derek smiled. Dark. Icy. Final. I took back what was mine. Lauren opened her mouth, but before she could speak, a courier knocked on the door, a thick envelope in hand. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Divorce papers. Lauren gasped. And Derek? He simply stood and walked away. Lauren stood frozen, her hands trembling as she gripped the divorce papers, her breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had been in control. She had made the choices. She had taken what she wanted, believing that Derek, loyal, predictable Derek, would always be there, waiting. But now everything was gone. She looked up at him, desperation flickering behind her wide eyes. Derek, please. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't care. He took a slow step forward, leaning in just enough that she could feel the heat of him, just like she had 100 times before. But this time, There was no love left between them. You threw this away, Lauren. His voice was calm, merciless, final. And now you're left with nothing. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but Derek had no sympathy left to give. He reached past her, grabbed his keys, and without another word, walked out the door. And as it slammed shut behind him, Lauren finally realized, this time he wasn't coming back. The best revenge? Never giving them another chance. In today's world, loyalty is a choice, not a guarantee. People who betray you do so because they believe you'll always be there to forgive them, to clean up their mess. But the truth? You owe no one blind devotion. If someone disrespects your love, your trust, or your loyalty, walk away without hesitation. Protect your heart, your finances, and your future. Never let desperation blind you to reality. Someone who betrays you once will do it again. The best revenge isn't anger or payback. It's thriving without them. Living a life so full that they become nothing but a forgotten mistake.